In 1967, Asian Paints became India's biggest paint company. And from then all the way till today, which is around 60 years, nobody has been able to take that top position away from Asian Paints. And it's not like nobody tried. Global paint giants entered India with all the money and technology that they could bring in, and even Indian companies spent decades trying to disrupt this space. But honestly, nothing really happened. Some of them struggled and left, and the others just remained mediocre. And in these 60 years itself, by the way, multiple economic crises happened. India got liberalized, which means foreign brands entered our country, and also many waves of disruptions happened that completely changed how Indian businesses fundamentally work and operate. But this one company, Asian Paints, remained completely untouched at the top. Nobody had successfully managed to challenge their business. But then, very interestingly, in February 2024, Kumar Mangalam Birla decided to attack this 60-year-old empire very strongly. His company, the Aditya Birla Group, launched a brand new paint company called Birla Opus.
The total investment is 10,000 crores. Our capacity will be more than the rated capacity or current capacity of the number 2, 3 and 4 players put together.
And you know what happened just after that? In just about 2 years, by March 2026, Birla Opus crossed 10% revenue market share in the decorative paint segment. So the paint industry, which once looked like nobody could ever shake it, was suddenly shaken up in just 2 years by Birla. So the obvious question then is how? That is exactly what I want to talk about, hopefully in good amount of depth and detail in today's video. I basically want to answer 3 questions. Number 1, how did Asian Paints build an empire so strong that nobody could really touch it for 60 years? Number 2, how did Birla compress so many decades of effort into just 2 years? And third, has Birla genuinely cracked the differentiation factor of Asian Paints, or has it simply spent 10,000 crore rupees buying temporary market share that will eventually go away the moment they stop funding it? My name is Bansal, and let's decode. Now, before we answer these 3 questions, we'll first need to understand something very strange about the paint business. See, the person who pays for the paint is usually never the person who actually decides which paint gets bought. And to understand this a little better, let's imagine that you have decided to repaint your house. Now see, when you do that, you might know which color you want. You might have saved a photo from Pinterest, or maybe you might have gotten inspired by a color that you saw in your neighborhood's house. But I can almost bet that apart from this, you would probably not know anything else. For example, you would not know which primer should be used, how much paint will be required, whether you need an emulsion or a distemper, which product will survive 5 years in the Indian dust, heat and humidity, etc. Correct? So what do you really do? The first thing you would most likely do is that you would call a painter. Now this painter would look at your wall, would recommend a product, tell you how many liters of paint to buy, and would also give you an opinion about which brand to actually buy it from. Correct? After that, either you or your painter goes to the neighborhood paint dealer, and that dealer has one more very interesting power. He or she knows what is available, which paint company can deliver your paint quickly, which product fits your budget, and whether the exact shade of color you selected can actually be given to you quickly or not. So if you basically look at what all of this means, almost every paint sale in India has to pass through 3 gates: the consumer gate, the painter gate, and the dealer gate. Now here is why this is so interesting. See, an advertisement can make a consumer ask the painter for a particular brand. But here's the thing, if the painter does not trust that particular brand, that recommendation can very easily change. Similarly, a painter can recommend a brand to a consumer, but if the dealer does not even have the product or the required shade, then the recommendation can very quickly change once again. And exactly in the same way, a dealer can keep a new brand, but if consumers never even ask for it, or if the painters never really recommend it, those paint buckets will simply gather dust in the shop. So this is the first mental model that I want you to remember. Paint is a 3-gate market, and a company that wants to really dominate Indian paints has to win all 3 gates at the same time. Now in these 3 gates, the most interesting one is the dealer gate, and I'll tell you why. Let's take a very simple example to understand this. Suppose a paint company offers 1000 kinds of shades. Now they probably sell those shades across 3 different product categories and 4 different pack sizes, which basically means there are 12,000 possible combinations. Now here's the thing, a small neighborhood shop cannot realistically keep 12,000 varieties of paint inside one shop, correct? That shop simply does not have that kind of space, and the shopkeeper certainly does not have that kind of money to procure the paint either. And that is exactly where Asian Paints did something very, very interesting back in the 1990s. They created this machine called the tinting machine, and the way it works is very, very interesting, and it is very important to understand what is exactly going on. See, instead of manufacturing and storing every final shade of paint separately, the dealer just keeps a smaller collection of base paint colors and colorants. Now, when you select a specific color, the tinting machine dispenses the required colorants onto the base paint and creates the final shade right there at the shop counter. To make it easier for you to understand, imagine you are using crayons to mix colors. For example, if you mix blue color and yellow color, it'll come out to be green color. That's broadly the concept that is used here as well. But if you think about it, the crazy and powerful part is that this machine basically turns any ordinary paint shop into a color factory all of a sudden. And this does three very interesting things. Number one, for the consumer, it creates a choice. For the dealer, it reduces the need to lock money into thousands of slow-moving finished shades. And for the paint company, it creates a permanent physical presence at the exact location where the purchase is actually being made by the consumer. So basically, things like these were the biggest reasons why Asian Paints was untouchable for so many decades. They basically built an entire operating system around the Indian paint dealer and consumer. And by the way, just to understand how important and crazy this was, let's very quickly take a look at how the paint industry actually used to work before this. And don't worry, I'll keep it short, but it's very important to understand what's exactly going on. See, traditionally, the manufacturer would sell large quantities of paint to a wholesaler or a distributor who would then supply it to hundreds of different retailers, and the retailers would then sell it to consumers like you and me. Now, of course, this arrangement is very convenient for the manufacturer because they just have to deal with the distributor and not so many shops. But the problem was that it placed an intermediary between the company and the final shopkeeper. So as a company, Asian Paints did not really have visibility to what was selling, which area was buying what, and stuff like that. Basically, think about it this way: if a wholesaler buys 10,000 liters of paint, then Asian Paints just knows that 10,000 liters has left its warehouse, correct? But on the other hand, if thousands of dealers placed orders directly, then Asian Paints could understand which product was selling, in which town, which pack size was selling more, where demand was rising, and where inventory was about to get over. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the first supercomputer in India was not purchased by a technology company. It was actually purchased by Asian Paints to understand and react to demand patterns. That is the level of craziness they were at. Now, if you slow down and zoom out a little bit here, you'll realize how the three gates that we initially discussed about connected so beautifully for Asian Paints. See, a lot of advertising and familiarity made the homeowner think about Asian Paints when they were actually buying paint. Second, the connections that Asian Paints had with painters made that recommendation even stronger. Third, the tinting machine and the dealer distribution network made sure that colors were available. And below everything was a crazy amount of data analysis always going on. And that kept repeating, by the way. More dealers produced more demand signals, more signals improved forecasting for Asian Paints, better forecasting and improved availability reduced the risk for a dealer because they would not have to keep things that they would never be able to sell. And a lower risk made the dealer even more comfortable selling Asian Paints. More sales produced even more data, and the entire cycle repeated itself. That is basically the beautiful business flywheel that Asian Paints had created for itself. So here's the thing, for so many years, anybody who had to really challenge Asian Paints had to face this very brutal flywheel. And they almost always lost. Basically, they had to do three things at the same time: get into the consumer's mind, get recommended by professional painters, and be available at the dealer's counter. And that is exactly where most of these companies went wrong. Most of them tried to attack one or two pieces of this system. And the reason why this never worked is because Asian Paint's real strength was in the fact that all three of these gates were connected to each other and every part of the business could see what the other was up to. And by the way, that sort of a connection is something that all sorts of businesses require, not just a paint company. But if you look at it practically, most businesses run today in a very different way. Sales sits in one tool, invoices in another, stock in a third, salaries in a fourth, and so on. None of them really talk to each other. So as a business owner, you end up being the person joining all the dots manually, and usually half of your week just goes into managing all of this complexity instead of actually focusing on growing your business. And that is exactly a problem that a platform like Odoo fixes. See, Odoo is an all-in-one business management platform that runs your sales, accounting, inventory, HR, website, and many other things all in one single place. And all of that is connected to each other. And on the 11th and 12th of September, Odoo is doing its biggest tech and business event at the Mahatma Mandir in Gandhinagar by the name Odoo Experience India. Now, across these 2 days, it'll have more than 200 talks from business founders, coaches, and influential people, more than 180 exhibitors from across the nation, masterclasses to help you ace the different aspects of business needs, and also the launch of their newest version of Odoo, which is version 20. Business owners will also share their experience on what they actually run their companies on, which by the way is a very different thing from just watching a demo video. And the entire event, by the way, is completely free to attend. I am putting up a registration link in the description, in the pinned comment, or you can scan this QR code. So do make sure you check it out. Now let's come back to the Indian paint market, and we were talking about how all of these different companies kept trying to defeat Asian Paints, but none of them were really able to. But then in 2024, Birla decided to do something very interesting. They launched Birla Opus and they decided to attack the entire market in one go. And that is exactly where the 10,000 crore rupee massive bet really begins. The first attack that Birla made was on the dealer. See, like we discussed earlier, the tinting machine was not just any other piece of equipment. It was literally the system through which thousands of shades of paint are produced at the same paint counter. Now, what did Birla Opus do? They basically started offering this tinting machine free of cost to dealers. And the interesting thing is, their tinting machine occupied 40% lesser space. Now think about what this means. They basically removed the dealer's two biggest problems: money or investment and space on their shop floor. They also of course went ahead and made dealer connections to make sure that this entire system worked very well. So this was more or less how they opened the dealer gate. But now of course a machine inside a shop is quite useless until the painters are actually willing to use and recommend the paint. Correct? That is exactly where Birla Opus did something extremely interesting. See, even before their full consumer launch, they began distributing samples and they started enrolling painting contractors across the entire country. The idea was very simple. Instead of asking painters to trust an advertisement, let's get them to use the product, support them with trial trainings, awards, incentives, and give them a solid reason to actually recommend the product to other people and other painters as well. So that was basically Birla's attack on the second painter's gate. And then came the first gate, which is the consumer gate. Now over here, Birla basically did three things. Number one, they started spending heavily on national level advertising. Second, they really used the credibility of the Aditya Birla name. And third, they started offering slightly extra paint on most of their packs free of cost. Now I know this third one sounds a little simple, but it is very important because consumers like you and I do not really understand paint chemistry like we discussed earlier. All we really care about is, are we getting a good product for the price we are paying, correct? So if there is a product that actually gives you a little extra for the same price and is recommended by your painter and is recommended by your dealer as well, then why would you not buy it? Am I right? So that was mainly Birla's attack on the consumer gate. Now I want you to look at how these three gates began to connect. See, national level advertisements made the consumers aware and curious. The painter's recommendations reduced the fear of trying something new and unknown. And the free tinting machine made sure that when the consumer or painter finally reached the shop, the dealer could actually complete the sale. And even though all of this sounds very simple right now in hindsight, that is exactly what made Birla Opus's entry so different in the market. And you know the results? By March 2026, it is estimated that Birla Opus crossed a 10% revenue market share in the organized decorative paint segment. That basically means 1 in every 10 rupees being spent on the organized decorative paint segment is actually being spent on Birla Opus, and all of that in just 2 years. Now I'll be clear, this is a company commissioned estimate and not really externally verified, so do take this number with a pinch of salt, but all that said and done, it is directionally definitely true. I mean, think about it, a brand that did not even exist until 2 years ago is now selling 1 out of 10 rupees spent in the organized paint market. I'll also be very clear that Birla Opus has not really defeated Asian Paints, but what it has done is that it has destroyed the assumption that Asian Paints could not be seriously challenged. And that, I think, is a monumental achievement. But that said, of course, there is also a very big question that still is unanswered. Has Birla Opus genuinely cracked the differentiation factor of Asian Paints, or have they simply spent so much money that they are seeing some results right now, but the moment the money stops flowing, the results will also stop showing up? See, here's the thing, Birla's management has been publicly very clear about their priorities. They first want to become the number 2 decorative paints player and then reach 10,000 crore rupees in revenue and only then focus on profitability. But of course, course, whether this crazy growth that they have right now will actually slow down once their investment actually slows down is honestly something that you and I cannot really answer right now. But it'll definitely be one of the most interesting things to look out for in the paint war segment of India. So over the next few months or so, if you're following this, forget the dramatic headlines and just watch for 3 very simple things. Number 1, does Birla's market share remain above 10% after the aggressive incentives are reduced? Number 2, do dealers and painters continue recommending Birla Opus when the commercial rewards return to normal? And third, can their paint business become profitable without giving away the market share that they have currently acquired? Now, if Birla passes these 3 tests, it would have genuinely cracked one of the most strong distribution models in Indian business. But if it fails, then those 10,000 crore rupees did not really buy Birla a moat or a differentiation factor. It probably just bought them a very expensive opening. Because please remember, a lot of money can buy you an entry into a market, but only profitable repeat demand can actually build a strong moat. That's it from my side in today's video. If you learned something new and enjoyed this, please do consider subscribing because it keeps me motivated to make more such case studies for you. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.